Good morning, everybody. Please let us know where you're joining us from in the chat. Welcome, welcome, everyone. Please let us know where you're joining us from. Morning, Danielle. Morning, Upenyu from Pretoria. Morning, Danielle from Stellenbosch. Welcome, Donald. Welcome, Buntu. Welcome, Meshulam from Zambia. We've got Mariana. We've got Sivi from Johannesburg. Welcome, welcome everyone to today's Tech Tribe Community Masterclass. As you all know, the Tech Tribe community is a space for you to learn as an entrepreneur. It's a space for you to connect and to meet like-minded business supporters, like-minded entrepreneurs, to take your hand and walk you through this entrepreneurial journey, because it can be quite a lonesome journey when you take it alone. So we're here to support you. And in today's masterclass, we're supporting you in partnership with TypeDev. Today's masterclass, we will take a deep dive into the several academic models that equip one to plan and implement well-constructed user experience and design principles, complemented by an understanding of gamified techniques to engage users to adopt desired behaviors and habits. This masterclass is mainly to help us gamify and enhance the user techniques or the user experiences of our applications and our MVPs and our products. Welcome, Hano. Hano is our speaker for this morning. I'll hand over to him.
Thank you very much. And welcome, folks. Thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very excited to tell you all about what we're going to be talking about here today. So there's quite a lot that I'm stuffed into this session. I hope I'm going to be able to get through everything. Essentially, what I'm looking to tell you about today is we're going to be talking first about the Octalysis framework. Now, the Octalysis framework is one of my favorite tools to use when we're creating a gamified strategy for any application that we're working on. Now, essentially, Octalysis is a tool, it's a framework that allows you to analyze the different strategies that you can use to gamify an application or any process, really, and then to make sure that you've got a balanced way of doing so. We're going to look at different ways different people are influenced, and by having a good balance, you can make sure that you're targeting your gamified strategy at different types of users. Now, the next thing that we're going to be looking at is a portion of the pricing canvas. Pricing canvas is part of the business strategy canvas. Again, a larger model that we use to plan out a business strategy for any application we're working on. And specifically in this case, I'm going to hone in on one or two of the principles here in the pricing canvas that will allow you to come up with ways of monetizing your MVP and the different phases of your MVP as you roll them out. Now, towards the end, then, I'm going to attempt to marry these ideas, and by using some of the strategies in the pricing canvas, as well as some of the ideas from the Octalysis framework, we're going to see how can you encourage and motivate your users to adopt your new MVP product as you roll it out, obviously making it possible for you to fund the next phase of development of that product. So jam-packed with a lot of theory today. There are no silver bullets, there are no magic ones. These are all simply some widely used adopted theories and models, but they've served us well. And by combining them and finding the areas where they fit together, I believe that anyone should be able to come up with a strategy to roll out a successful minimum viable product. Now, just a brief discussion about TypeDev and what we do. So TypeDev prescribed to a set of principles, and the first one that we like to look at is what we call team up. So whenever we've got a new product or a new client that we engage with, we first identify who would be the ideal team to facilitate the requirements for that particular client. Now, we've got a multidisciplinary team of developers, strategists, business analysts, designers, and together we are able to facilitate just about any requirements that you might have from a software development perspective. The next thing we do is we architect the lasting solution. Now, this is where my team and I come in. We like to spend a lot of time with the client. It is a client-centric process where we find out what it is that your requirements are, what you think your requirements are, what your clients actually need, and then come up with the perfect blueprint of what the ideal system would be if we started implementing it. The next phase, of course, building that system and architecting or shipping the quality product that we built for you and put together from the strategy that we've collected. And finally, we'd like to make sure that we leave both you and all of your clients breathless with a breathtaking experience. Now, TypeDev follows agile methodologies. I'm sure most of you are familiar with this process. Agile is essentially a business model or a project management model that allows us to very quickly and easily react to different realizations or different, as new information comes to light, we're able to shift gear and make sure that we accommodate whatever needs arise throughout the development process, which is obviously versus a waterfall, which is a much more rigid and straightforward way of doing a project. This allows us to react to any changes in the market or in the requirements. We are also a technology agnostic development house, meaning that whatever the best software packages and the best frameworks for your solution might be, that's what we will apply to your system. We don't bog you down in any particular development phase or development system. We make sure that we tailor it to whatever your requirements are. Now, getting to the content of today's class, we're going to start by talking about the Octalysis framework. Now, Octalysis is a framework that was developed by one of my personal heroes, Mr. Yukai Chow. He's a Canadian-born gentleman of Asian descent, and he essentially looked at gamification, and he wanted to collect all the different ways and then categorize, strategize, and sort them into different ways of how you can get your users, and not even users really, you can gamify any process. You can gamify your laundry if you like to do so, but to gamify your life, to make sure that we bring play into our daily lives, we bring play into our processes, and we bring play into our businesses. Now, gamification is a term that it's a buzzword that a lot of people hear, but I don't think that always everyone knows what exactly we're talking about. We're not talking about games, we're not talking about mobile or platform games. What we're talking about is psychology. What we're talking about is driving your users' behavior. What we do with gamification is we make work fun. As I said, you can even gamify your laundry simply by standing on one end of the room, rolling your socks into a ball and chucking it into the closet from where you're standing. Now, is that necessarily the best way of doing laundry? I don't know, but it's going to be much more fun than just standing there and doing it one sock at a time. So the whole idea is that we want to get people to play as they do their work. We want people to adopt game metrics and incorporate these game metrics into their daily lives, into their daily jobs, in those jobs that they need to get done. And the Octalysis framework has identified 8 core drives, right? Now, these are 8 different psychological methods to drive your users to adopt certain behaviors, those behaviors that are desirable to both yourself and to them. All right, now we're going to be going through each of these in some very fine detail. We're going to be looking and talking about some examples of where we can see these being applied in industry to also illustrate exactly how they work. We're then going to be talking about how they are arranged, because their arrangement is very purposeful, and how you can use this tool to make sure that you can then, as I mentioned, apply pressure or apply drives to different types of users, because different types of users react to different types of drives, and you want to have a good balance of those to make sure that you encourage the greatest amount of different users to interact with your application, campaign, software, what have you. Right, now the first drive here is epic meaning and calling. Now, this is one that is used a lot in marketing and in video games, in that matter. What this epic meaning is about is making the process into something that is bigger than yourself. All right. Now, a good example of this is Tom's shoes. Let's say, for instance, KFC's donate to child hunger. Anything where you connect something bigger than the organization, bigger than the client, bigger than the user, to the activity involved. You make that a more meaningful experience. You make that into something that means more to them than just the job that they're doing. I mean, as I said, this is something big in video games. You're always the one savior, the only one who can go out into the world and crush that big bad that's out there. And so it's bigger than just solving this problem for yourself, you're solving it for the world. Now, I've got an example of an application called Pain Squad that I'd like to show you. So I think the sound isn't sharing, so I'm going to be telling you about this application itself. What this essentially does is they identified that when children that are suffering from debilitating disease, they need to take medicine to manage their pain throughout the day. Now, with children that are already in pain, they're not very easily to get to adopt behaviors. And if they don't track their pain, if they don't tell the doctors how they're reacting to a specific medicine, and they get sporadic inputs, as you see here, we can't track exactly if this medicine is working. We can't see what this is doing for the kids, and we can't really see when this is working. So what Pain Squad does is it turns you tracking your pain into something that you're doing with everyone else that's doing it around the world. It initiates you into the Pain Squad as a type of if not an army, maybe a police squad, where you are fighting pain. You're fighting against the pain, not in yourself only, but in anyone else and everyone else who would benefit from the research. By tracking your reaction, tracking what happens when you take specific medicines, we can see exactly when something's working, what it's doing, how it's working, how it's not working. Now, this is a Canadian-based application, and as you can see, they've used a lot of Canadian actors from a lot of Canadian television shows that the children might recognize to encourage them to keep doing what they need to do. And as you go through the application, you rank up, you become a sergeant, you become a general, you become part of the Pain Squad, and you become a leader in the Pain Squad, making the world a better place, and not only solving your own problem, but solving a problem that's bigger than yourself. Now, the interface that they give you is very easy to understand, very easy to follow. And again, since the target audience here is children, we want to keep them motivated, and we want to make sure that it's easy for them to do what they need to do. So by leveraging celebrity, by leveraging the ease of use, and by leveraging that epic meaning, we're getting kids to adopt these behaviors that's saving their lives, helping them get better, but also making them feel part of a bigger solution, challenging their pain as a squad, as a group, and not just suffering by themselves. Right, let's move on to the next one. All right, the next one is a fairly straightforward one. This is one that I think we've all seen a lot of. This is one that we see have been using a lot in industry for many years already. What we're looking at here is development and accomplishment. Now, this essentially has to do with feedback. This is to do with telling a user where they are and giving them some indication as how far we've got to go. By giving you just that little bit of feedback, you get motivated, you understand where you are in a situation, and you can see where the end of the situation is. I mean, it's as simple as seeing on a video that you've got a progress bar. On any forum that you'll fill in nowadays, you can see a progress bar. So any application of feedback and tracking your progress, this is where this particular core drive comes in. Now, my example that we're looking at here is the Nike Fuel Band that does this incredibly well. Now, the Nike Fuel Band gives you a countdown or a tracking of your current activities, how many kilojoules you've used, how far you've run, how many steps you've taken. It really goes and it collects a lot of information and it gives you that feedback to tell you exactly where you are. Now, we've seen this kind of thing in a lot of other applications, of course, as well, but I particularly like how they apply it here. They've got great visuals, they've got little animations that encourage you, things that pop out at you, things, lights that's flashing. Look at that beautiful progress bar that they have there. And so really, you're getting excited by seeing this countdown, you're getting excited by seeing progress, and understanding how far you go makes you want to go even further. It also makes you challenge yourself because you know how far you went yesterday, and today you want to go just that little bit further. So I'm sure you can all think of a million other examples where you've seen things like this. So I think this is one that is already very widely used in the industry and very well understood, but it's so powerful that it's one that you must make sure not to forget about when you are gamifying your application. Now, the next one is one that I find quite interesting, and this is empowerment of creativity and feedback. Now, what that means is that we as developers want to give our users the ability to do something that they would not be able to do without our intervention, thus empowering them and making them feel that the application is, that they are more with the application, they are more with our campaigns, they are more with our intervention than they were with before or without it. Now, I've come across an excellent example of this. It's called Foldit. Now, Foldit is an application that has been winning a lot of awards in the past. I think it's already almost a decade old, to be honest. But what Foldit does is it presents you with a structure of proteins. Now, I'm not going to pretend to understand any of what's going on here, but the game is simple enough that anyone can play it. Now, why this is important is if you bind certain protein structures together, you can find the antibodies for specific viruses. Now, there are so many different combinations that we've tried finding these combinations through artificial intelligence and computing and running tests and trying every permutation until you find the one that fits. But we've just not come up with a processor as strong as the human brain that can sit there and try and solve the puzzle to see how these bits and pieces fit together. And so what happened when they rolled this out to gamers is within a week, they had found the proteins that you needed to combine to almost 50, if not 100 different strains of viruses, some of which that we've been trying to find an antibody for over 15 years. So here again, the people playing this game aren't doctors. They don't understand why what they're doing is working or how it works, but understanding the bonds and the hydrogen bonds and the different bits that fit together, that is something that anyone who likes to solve puzzles can easily understand. And by figuring out where to fit these proteins together, which proteins to fit to each other, and farming that out to a bunch of gamers who sit and solve puzzles for for their free time, for their daily lives. We've managed to save millions of lives. We've managed to figure out some of these problems that doctors and the technology that they work with have been struggling with for decades. So I think this is a great example of how we can use technology to give power and give the opportunity to do things that our users would simply not be able to do without that intervention and without that application in hand. All right, the next one that we're looking at is ownership and possession. Now, what this psychological driver is all about is we want people to see the processes as their own. We want them to be invested in the outcomes because the outcomes matter to them because it is theirs. The outcomes affect them. The outcomes are part of their identity, their corporation's identity. And by taking that ownership, they want to achieve the goals that we've set out for them in our applications, in our campaigns, or whatever else we're working with. Now, the example that we have here is a little game called Dragon Box. Now, in Dragon Box, this is an application that is used to teach mathematics and specifically algebra to young children. But they do have versions that scale up for older children. I've heard that there are some even being released up until high school level fairly recently. Now, what the application does is it explains to you that you have a little dragon in a box. Now, the dragon is shy. He doesn't want to come out to eat unless he's alone on the side of the screen. So you need to find a way to move all the other creatures to the other side of the screen so the dragon can feel safe to come out and eat his lunch. Now, the dragon obviously represents X, and each of the other little creatures on the screen represents some numeral or some variable in the equation. And slowly but surely, the creatures get replaced with numbers. The children get taught that a dark version of a character can be swapped with a light version of a character, or by adding a dark version, you can remove a light version and one cancels out the other. And so, as with algebra, by adding negatives or positives of certain things, you can move them to the, one side of the screen or the other. So, making a game of feeding your little dragon out of the mathematical understanding of the basic algebra, and as you can see, some fairly advanced algebra that they eventually get into. So the ownership here is, it's my dragon. He's hungry. I care about his health and I care about his well-being. So I want to try and solve this problem by getting rid of all the other monsters that's hovering around his food so he can feel safe and secure to come out and eat. I'm sure you can think of a lot of other examples of where this has been applied in the past, where we make the outcome that we're after, that we make the user feel that it's valuable to them, that they take that ownership into it. Now, the next example that we're looking at, or the next core drive that we're looking at, is social influence. And this is a very strong one. This is one that's very widely used. Any social media campaign, any share, like, this is obviously then also a very easy one to understand, I think. But I'd like to delve a little bit deeper into the psychology today by showing you a study called the ASH study, which is a fairly old study already, and a lot of you might have already heard about it, but it's one that I find absolutely fascinating. Now, obviously, the basic idea here is that what others think of you and the social influence that they have on you changes your behavior. So if you have an application where you can share or like or see what other people are doing, it will change your behavior. It will change how you interact with it. Other ways of importing or including social interaction in your application is by having things like leaderboards where I can now compete against people, because a lot of people are driven by the need to be on top. Okay, so we want to look at what our neighbors are doing, and we want to react to that and see what we can do better to compete with them. A great example here that I really love is there's a company in America called O-Power, and I think it's very topical in South Africa. We could really use a company like O-Power right now. But what O-Power does, it's obviously similar to Eskom, where they provide the power to the various households in their areas. And when you get your power bill from them, you don't just get yours, but you get everyone in your blocks. So you can not only see how much power you used, but you can also see how much your neighbors in a certain area used. You can compare yourself to them, and whether it's a drive of wanting to spend less money than your neighbors or a drive of wanting to be greener than your neighbors, the fact that you can see what everyone else is doing, they found has drastically improved or reduced the number of the cost and usage of power between the different people. So potentially something that we should really look into here at the moment, shouldn't we, folks? If we can all lessen our influence on the grid, then potentially we would have less need for load shedding. In any case, moving to our example here, this is the ash study. Now, as you can see, this footage, I think, is from the 60s or the 70s, and the study itself is even older than that. But essentially what this boils down to is the reaction that people have to each other's choices. Now, what happens here is that everyone in this room, except the gentleman in the red hoodie, is an actor. So he believes he's part of the study to see how people understand certain mathematical issues, and it's very basic stuff. It's not even anything that's challenging. What happens is they show them these flashcards, and on the flashcards, they see, they ask the audience to vote which of these lines are the same length as the line on the left. And now, unfortunately, without the sound, you're not going to quite appreciate the befuddlement of this poor gentleman, but you'll see very quickly that as he picks 3, which is clearly the right answer, everyone else picks 2. And he is absolutely flabbergasted by the fact that nobody else sees the world in the same way he does. Very quickly, he starts wondering if he's wrong, if he misunderstands the question. Very quickly, he starts thinking that, well, if everyone else is saying that the answer is 1, so there the gentleman says 1, look at this poor guy's face. Very quickly, he goes, but it's 2, it's definitely 2, there's no question about it. But by the 4th or the 5th, it doesn't even take that long. By the 3rd, the 4th, or the 5th card, he's agreeing 3. And he goes 3. And so the social pressure of what everyone else around me is doing is so strong that he's not even believing his own eyes. Again, he thinks he must be misunderstanding the question. There must be something wrong with his eyes even, but he simply conforms. And we as human beings have got that extreme drive to conform to what our peers are doing and to what our peers think. Now, this is so deeply ingrained in us that our simian ancestors even have a similar reaction. There was another study done on something in a similar vein, where they had put a number of chimpanzees in a cage, and they had a ladder, and at the top of the ladder there was some bananas hanging off the roof. Now, what would happen is if any of the chimpanzees would go near the ladder, jets of water would spray not only that chimp, but all the chimps in the enclosure. And so they very quickly learned that, all right, there's food up there, but it's not worth trying because we're all going to be sprayed with water. And it got to a point where they would even keep each other away because they would know, well, look, if you go to the ladder, we're all going to get punished for your actions. They then got to the point where no one would approach the ladder. It was understood. It was just not a done thing. No one would go for bananas. They then started replacing the chimpanzees in the enclosure one by one, taking out those that were aware of the jets of water and replacing them with chimpanzees that weren't aware of it. Of course, the new chimpanzee would go for the bananas, all the other chimps would stop him from doing so, and he would quickly learn, all right, you don't go for the bananas because otherwise the other chimpanzees pick me up. Got to the point where they had replaced every single chimpanzee that was aware of the water jets, and still the chimpanzees, from a social perspective, were stopping each other from going near the ladder. So yeah, I find it fascinating that we are, this conformist approach is so ingrained into how we look at the world and how we perceive things. Now, the next one is scarcity and impatience, and a fairly topical image that I've used here again. When things are scarce, when there is a limit to how many of a certain thing is available, we of course put more value on that thing, and look at the rush of, for all things in the world, toilet paper, when the pandemic just started almost 2 years ago now. This, I don't think, again, is anything that is strange to us. We can all immediately recognize what's going on from this. Black Friday is something that isn't even supposed to be a thing in our country, but in the last couple of years, the simple fact that there's a time limit to incredible deals and a limit of stock, people just absolutely lose it. This is, I think, again, something that I don't need to go into a lot of detail explaining. We are all very aware of all of the different marketing ploys where buy it now, limited time, limited offer, only one left. This is something that we've seen in marketing, and that, of course, we can apply in our applications as well. If you look at stuff like Candy Crush, games like Candy Crush, they give you a limited number of lives to try a certain stage, and then you need to wait a certain amount of time to be able to try and that level again. So the psychology there is you're not going to quit in the middle of a level because now you're wasting a life. So again, something I think that we all understand very well. Right, the next one is unpredictability. Now, this is a simple psychological concept again. This is where gambling comes in. Any campaign, anything where randomness is involved, that's where this core drive comes in. And the example I have here today is there's a company in America that when you get a speeding fine, the fine that you need to pay goes into a lucky draw. And any driver who drove past that same traffic camera within a certain time span is then eligible to win all of the fines paid by the people who were going above the speed limit. Now, as with many of these, I think you can see there's a social component, some of the other core drives involved here as well. But that's simply what this comes down to, is the fact that you might just win the lucky draw to actually get all of the fines paid by the people who didn't obey the law, drives you to want to actually stay within the limits. The final one is loss avoidance. And what this comes down to is you want to give your user something and tell them that, okay, you've got this thing now, adopt this particular behavior or you're going to lose it. Now, there's a very fun example that I have here called the zombie run. Now, with the zombie run, this is a type of a exercise regime. There's actually an app that you can download as well that gives you audio cues in a similar vein. But what happens is you've got a certain number of lives, which are those red tags hanging off the back of that gentleman, and the zombies are chasing you, and they can steal those lives from you, and if they've got all of your lives, then you're dead. And so it motivates you to run faster, it motivates you to adopt the behavior of doing some exercise for the good of your own health. The other fun part is with these big zombie run events, if you die, you turn into a zombie, and now you can start chasing people, and again, you're running. So I really like this concept, and I would love it if it actually came to South Africa. I've seen these events take place in other places around the world. But as I said, there's an app, and the app would also track your progress, have audio cues with zombies coming up behind you. You've got earphones in your head, and then it would motivate you to run faster, give you times of breaks where there's no one chasing you, and motivate you again to adopt those behaviors of exercising enough to get away. All right, now, I'm just speeding up a bit. I am running out of time a little bit here. So in the structure of this application or of this framework, we're looking at white hat and black hat. White hat's at the top and the black hat's at the bottom. That simply means white hat is things that we encourage people to do. Black hat is people we threaten people to do. It's not negative or positive. Think about it in ways of if you've got your child and you need to get them to eat their vegetables, you can either tell them that you're going to give them a spanking or ice cream. And one of those is black hat, the other is white hat. But at the end of the day, the outcome is positive. So it's not about a negative or positive, but the outcome that we're driving. We also then have left and right, or intrinsic and extrinsic. So things that people adopt by themselves and things that we need to get people to adopt. Now, when you actually then apply all of these different metrics, you can see that you now come up with a graph, and you get this wonderful little tool at ukaichow.com/Octalysis tool. You can just Google the Octalysis tool, and it allows you to rate your application in certain areas. And what the theory says here is you actually want to have a fairly balanced out graph, meaning that you would then have different kinds of people reacting to different kinds of drives, adopting these behaviors. So that's what you want to aim for. I'm going to run ahead a little bit and get to the pricing structure. Right, now this is what I want to pair with my gamification talk today. We're looking at the pricing canvas, which is part of the business development canvas by Ezra, I'm going to butcher her surname, Kukovici. She's the founder of the Pricing Innovations organization. Now, this is 10 ways in which you can analyze any product to see how you could monetize it better. Now, there's 4 ways of breaking these up. First of all, monetize your current customers better, increase your margins, so the profits that you make on the current product, and growing your market. But the one I want to focus on today is acquiring new business, because with an MVP, obviously we don't have an existing client base. We want to go and find that client base. So we're going to be looking at some of these concepts, not in detail, as unfortunately, obviously we don't have time to go to anything in too much detail, but I do just want to touch on all of them. Now, first of all, in your channel strategy, you're going to be looking at your target market. Now, the target market, you want to make sure that you're targeting the right kind of people. 80% of your sales is going to come from 20% of your market. 20% of the people that buy your product is going to spend 80% of the profits that you make from it. So you want to identify that person. But as you can see, you're also going to have some periphery, people on the periphery, and you want to target them as well. But you want to tailor your product to be exact to that kind of person so that you can attract that core market. You also want to look at your channel partners, who's already got a market that you can use, who's got distribution channels that you can use, who out there is there that you can partner with to increase your sales and get your product out there quicker. The next one is the product strategy. And according to Roman Pitcher, market strategy needs to first look at the specific market needs. You want to look at what your key differentiating factor is. How do you stand out from your competitors? And lastly, what is your business's goals? So the product strategy also, you want to look at with your growth, how are you going to acquire new customers? Or you can monetize your product differently. Again, with MVP, we're not monetizing anything yet, so that's less appropriate here. Again, with increasing profitability, we don't have profit yet, but driving your market share is something we want to look at. So acquiring new customers and driving your market share are the two that for an MVP stands out for me. Now, you can deploy all of those. You can try and use every single one of those strategies, but if you're targeting everyone, if you're trying everything, then you're trying nothing really. So focus on what's going to be appropriate for your business. For an MVP, that would be acquiring new customers and driving the market share. Now, market share is essentially looking at what kind of product are you selling. If we're looking at the price versus the quality of your product, we have here people who would buy the Lindt chocolate because it's a better quality product, but we also have people who would buy Kit Kat because it's a more affordable product. So you want to place yourself in that layout to decide exactly where is going to be the best place for you to fit in. You can also look at the product value canvas. I'm going to not spend time on this at the moment. We also want to look at identifying our value drivers. Let's see. I'll get to your questions in a minute. But the one that I really want to talk about today is your offer structure. And the offer structure has got a phase in which you identify your jobs to be done. Okay. Now, the jobs to be done are those specific tasks, those behaviors, those things that you want your users to do. All right. So you want to identify those jobs. You want to then look at the main jobs as well as the related jobs, not just the big thing that we want to do, but there's going to be lots of little other things that your users are going to want to do as well. These jobs are going to have functional as well as an emotional aspect. So the functional aspect is what we actually get done. The emotional aspect is how you feel about it. Look at there, you've got your social dimension. So immediately we're bringing in one of our core drives here by first of all, your emotional aspects. How do I feel about what I'm doing? But how is everyone else going to feel about what I'm doing as well? We always look at our competitors to see what they've done and what they've managed to, where they've failed and where they've succeeded. We see what we can learn from in that respect. You've got your direct and your indirect competitors. So if someone else has got a shopping cart, we're not going to compete with Amazon if we're only selling computer parts. But let's see how their selling system works. Let's see how their shopping cart system works, because that's something we can learn from. So it's not just looking at what we can learn from direct competitors, but our indirect competitors as well. You then want to break your jobs into an action object context. I'm not going to harp on this too long, but you want to make sure that you say an action that you want to do, something that you perform that action on, and then finally in what context you use that action. Finally, you want to look at what's the most important and what's how satisfied are users currently with how that is being facilitated. So you end up with a graph where you've got over-serviced, under-serviced, and serviced. You want to target the under-serviced. Anything that your users needs to get done where there's already a product out there, but that's not facilitating those specific under-serviced needs. So it's important and not being looked at already. That's where you actually want to go and make sure that you target those actions. All right. So you look at the desired outcomes, the undesired outcomes for yourself and for your users, and you plot that onto a graph to see, again, those behaviors that you want people to adopt. Now, I'm going to jump ahead into the final part of this discussion, and that is looking at your milestones. Now, when you've got an MVP, you want to make sure that you roll it out in a way that you're always moving forward. If you're building a supercar, don't start with the wheels and then the axle and then the body. Start with a skateboard and then a scooter and then a bicycle. You want to make sure that every release, every MVP that you build is something that people can use and move forward with. All right. So with that in mind, putting this all together, what you want to do is you want to identify those jobs that need to be done, those behaviors that you want your users to adopt. You're going to prioritize these based on the user's needs, the technological barriers, because technological barriers might require more time to develop. And you're going to say, these are the quick wins. I can quickly build these and I can easily get them out there, and they're important so my users need them. And that's going to be your skateboard. And you're going to then list them in order of importance and how long it's going to take you to develop them. And you're going to roll those out in those order of milestones. Okay. Next, what we do is we take the Intelligence framework and we apply it to each of those jobs to see how we can get our users to adopt these behaviors. And we end up with a breakdown where we've got the Intelligence framework applied to all of these various jobs to be done. And that would then end up with a model that is greater than the sum of its parts. If some of your jobs lean more, and the way that you get people to adopt them leans more towards the social influence, others to ownership, and others to scarcity, by bringing them together, you get your balanced Intelligence framework, and you get your balanced model, getting all of the different users to want to adopt those behaviors. Now, apologies for rushing a little bit there at the end. I do want to make sure we've got a few minutes for questions. So if I can open the floor, let's go over to that.
Okay, thank you so much, Hannah, for sharing. We've got a question here from Jenny. She says, what apps can you recommend as games to help learning disabled people?
So there's a number of those. There's a very great one that I came across the other day, which the name escapes me for the moment. Be My Eyes, it's called. Now, when for Be My Eyes, two different types of users can register for the application. The first is obviously people who have visibility deficiencies, from being totally blind to people who just struggle to see a little bit. And the other part of the user base is people who volunteer to assist these people. Now, you take your phone as the blind person and you simply point it at the thing that you're trying to make out. Let's see, you want to know which of the products on the shelf is sugar-free, because you might also be diabetic. And you need to know which of these products you need to buy. The person helping you sees on the camera what you're looking at, and they tell you, all right, it's the one to the left, or to the right, or it's a blue one, or it's a gray one. And so by getting people to adopt these behaviors of, again, epic meaning, something bigger than myself, we have these people registering, helping to help these people with deficiencies. There's another one I came across in a similar vein, where cataract is a big problem for people with visibility issues. And there are areas, especially in South Africa, where doctors can't really get out to analyze all the patients to see who is eligible or who can be helped with surgery on the cataracts. So there is an app I saw that came out maybe 3 years ago, where specifically in the Kalahari, and I think it's spread since, but again, the doctor can do an analysis of a person over a camera. And this person can get a consult, and this person can even make a booking with the doctor to go into town to get a cataract surgery. So apologies if that's not veered very specifically into one kind of disability, but there are so many out there that uses this approach to get people to help each other to work on these kinds of problems.
Okay, thank you so much. There's another question from Lundi. It says, how do you strike a balance between gamification but still give a strong professional or corporate experience?
The trick with gamification is you should not let your users necessarily know that's what you're doing. What you want to do is you want to make it so natural and so much part of the system that this is just how things works. But it's fun to do and it's easy to do. Again, it's psychology. It's not about games. And this, I think, is where a lot of people misunderstand the concept and the point of gamification. We want to bring play into your life, into your daily work. And that's how you do it anyway. You want to see how quickly can I close all my tickets for the day. I want to close more tickets than my colleagues. I want to be the first. I want to be the best. And that's a natural thing in us. So leverage those natural drives that people have to want to engage with things and use that to develop your technology around that. And the Intelligence framework is a way that you can identify ways in which you can do so.
Okay, thank you. There's another one in the chat. It's a bit long, so you'll bear with me. She says a lot of examples I have seen where gamification has worked successfully is in America or European markets. There are some African exceptions like Nike and Vitality, but they are not the rule. Is this because African startups have not fully exploited or explored gamification, or because the African market isn't as suited or ready to gamification, or perhaps a combination of both?
I would say that obviously in countries where the technology is more prevalent, it's rolled out quicker, but I've seen a lot of examples. In fact, at TypeDev have used a lot of examples where we apply gamification to our to our applications that we build. We have, for instance, built a application where for African Unity Life, one of our big clients, we have an insurance form where you can create an avatar of your family members as you take out the policy for each of your family members. So we're getting you to play a little bit with the different characters that you can build, and trying to make it represent your children and your wife and whatever else. And we get you to stay on the form longer and want to fill in the information that we put on there. So I think that as the technology becomes more prevalent, and the statistics say that more than 70% of the people in South Africa, even in rural areas, have smartphones, I think we're going to see a lot more of it happening in our own country as well.
Okay, thank you. Just one last one. It's from Uchilo, and I've seen a lot of questions like that in the registration as well. A lot of people are concerned that gamification, it could be expensive, it could be time consuming, and as a builder of an MVP, you want to minimize on cost, you want to minimize on time spent. So how best can gamification be implemented, but in a cost and time effective way?
So it depends on how you roll it out and exactly how deep you go into it. There's a couple of simple ways that you can do a little bit of gamification. For instance, feedback, putting a progress bar in a form, that's not expensive. That's going to be only a little bit of extra development time. So I'm hoping that some of the examples that I've showed you today shows you that gamification doesn't need to be expensive. It's about thinking of how you get your users to interact with your content. It's psychology. It's not games. It's really just saying that, well, instead of just doing X, I'm going to do X and a little bit of Y. But the other thing that I also want to stress, and this is something that I rushed over a little bit towards the end, is you want to put down your milestones. You want to understand that, all right, for the skateboard version of my application, I'm going to have something very simple. I'm going to have something very cheap, but I'm going to monetize. I'm going to find ways of making sure that the jobs to be done that I've included in my skateboard version are so attractive and so necessary that I'm going to get enough users that it will be able to fund the next version. And then you can incorporate some more flamboyant, some more time sensitive or so time intensive implementations of a better version thereof. So if you're concerned about what something's going to cost, dumb it down, break it down to its base component parts, and spend the minimum amount of time on it, with the understanding that in the scooter version, in the bicycle version, in the motorbike version, we're going to have a different implementation of this. And by the time we reach a supercar, it's going to be perfected into what we imagined it to be at the beginning.
Okay, thank you so much. I think that brings us to the end of our session today. Thank you so much, everyone, for tuning in. I hope you enjoyed the session and that you've learned a lot. And to Hanno, thank you so much on behalf of the attendees and the Tech Tribe community team. Would like to thank you so much for teaching us how to gamify our work and our innovations and make things less tiresome and less boring and more interesting, and for teaching us how to enhance our user experience, the user experience of our product. We look forward to more that this partnership will bring to the community, and we look forward to more sessions like this, where you will continue to teach us how to make our products better. The next session with TypeDev, the next masterclass, is on the 25th of November, and it will be on strategic product design. So please make sure that you don't miss this one. We'll be sharing the registration link soon after this session. From myself, Lindy Ngosi, and the Tech Tribe community team, bye everyone.
Thank you, Lindy, and thank you to the audience. It's been a great pleasure.
Thank you.